Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Brown. I'm with two of my colleagues from Forte Group. We have CJ Montano. He is a partner and managing director here at Forte Group. And we have Leo Fedorov. Leo, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
Leo is a solutions manager and engagement architect here at Forte Group. The reason that we're joining you guys today is we wanted to talk a little bit about business continuity planning. And particularly relevant topic at this time. We're obviously joining remotely. We're working from home as a part of the stay-at-home request and order here in Illinois amidst COVID-19. So we have been working from home for a few weeks now, but we've kind of been discussing how business continuity planning is important. And I think everyone probably realizes that at this point, and it's a particularly relevant topic. So what we want to do today is share some pragmatic approaches to what businesses can do now to improve their business continuity planning and business resiliency. So, CJ, we'll start with you. These are pretty unexpected times, and not many organizations anticipated this, not many people did. What do you think organizations can do now to improve their BCP planning?
Sure, Steve, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with whomever's listening today. So it's interesting because, our organization having built some software around business continuity planning, and Leo will get to that more later, there's a new dynamic, I think, that's involved here, and that is, with a pandemic, you have as much impact to your business revenue as traditional business risk to things that might be caused from a hurricane or tornado, where it causes a branch to up and move its operations. You have the added sort of stress of trying to maintain business as well. So I'm speaking as a partner in Forte Group and somebody who is privileged enough to have those conversations at my level. And one of the things that we're doing that I think is important right now is we are looking really at the business from two different dimensions. One as a risk assessment and an impact analysis. So these two things are traditional in any business continuity plan. But the way that we're changing it is we're looking at the risk to your fundamental foundation as revenue. So how much of your revenue is tied to something of risk? And what is the impact should that revenue be compromised in any way? So I think it's the number one thing, whether you're looking to plan for something that's up and coming that might happen, such as like a weather-related event, or something like this, which is a little bit more recession-related. It's always important to put together some sort of risk assessment and impact analysis. And why that's really important is it allows you to put together the most important artifact, which is a playbook. Playbooks are not the most fun things in the world to put together because in the event of a business impacting event, oftentimes it's negative and you are dealing with a lot of emotions along with the actual event that happened. The playbook is a really key thing because it allows you to build it now when maybe you're not as emotional and maybe you're looking at things with a little bit more logic and reason. And then it serves as a guide when those events occur. So one of the things we did was we built that playbook, and now as we move through this, we are able to look at key performance indicators of our revenue, what's under risk, and make decisions that have been built into a playbook. Of course, no playbook's going to be perfect, and conversations will shift, and you'll have to be agile, but it gives you a reasonable structure to start with. So that's one of the things that I think is the most important thing. To preparing for any business interrupting event. A couple other things, Steve, that I won't get into as deeply, but they're just very quick, pragmatic things. Updating your communication methods. Everybody knows now that we're remote, and this is every business impacting event typically has some sort of communication mitigation strategy with it. But some simple things that you can do that we're doing in our organization is, number one, update your call tree. Can you have the latest information to get in contact with anybody in your business, especially those in essential functions? Fault tolerant communication channels. Oftentimes organizations get so efficient that they use one communication channel for everybody as to keep alignment. Well, in a business interrupting event, that's not always the best thing because maybe 3G is not available and Wi-Fi is. You want to be able to have fault tolerant communication channels. And then I think the last thing is just the frequency in which you have conversations should probably increase. Even if just to connect with people, it is ultimately a good idea to have a little bit better touch points because when you're working remote, it's very easy to just say, I don't necessarily need to know that, or somebody else doesn't need to know that. Information that would naturally come out during, while passing somebody in the office will not come out in a remote setting. And so increasing that frequency also increases the likelihood that you'll share data that is important. And then I think the last thing that we're doing that I think is important is, and we learned this from a very good chief information security officer. And so I would say that if you haven't hired a chief information security officer or a service that allows you to think this way, really start to take this time to think about resiliency as much as reactive continuity. So many people think, what if this happens, what will I do? In our organization and in many of the organizations that are much more technically savvy, they start to think of what might happen and how do I prevent it? And when you think that way, resiliency thinking comes into your mind versus reactive continuity thinking. It's more risk avoidance versus risk reaction or impact reaction. So those are the three things we are doing is we're putting together a playbook, we're updating our communication methods, and we're starting to think about resiliency and proactive thought versus reacting to an event that may occur if we continue, to go down this road that we're going down in the pandemic.
Yeah. So what lessons do you think organizations can learn from all this with respect to resiliency and continuity planning, and maybe what lessons have you learned?
Yeah, so it's, having been in leadership positions for probably 15 years now, I always think that, hey, maybe I'll have all the answers and maybe my experiences will help. And they do. But there's always some new dynamic. Who would have thought that something like this could really occur? I mean, it's certainly within the creative minds of many that something like this could occur, but to actually have it happen creates a whole new subset of issues. But one of the things we can learn from this quarantine, I think so far, is that our business, Forte Group, and it is wonderful at this, is a very agile business. And so we ask ourselves on a daily basis, whether it's in calls or it's sort of moved down the communication tree, is we ask ourselves the one very simple question, which is, what is the most valuable thing you can do today that wasn't necessarily valuable yesterday? I think this gives you a lot more tactical perspective and keeps you on the cutting edge of how things are changing, right? You could sit here and put together the playbooks that I talked about, and that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, if you're really not asking yourself, what's the most important thing I could do in the next hour, in the next day, in the next week, you're probably limiting your ability as a company to make it through this type of quarantine. Secondly, I think, people need connectivity. And one of the things that I'm learning is to over communicate in less formal ways. So whereas I'm a big supporter of having an agenda and having a clear goal for all of your meetings, some of that is, I wouldn't say thrown out the window, but in addition to that, or as a balance to that, is to just reach out and be supportive and responsive to the people around you. You didn't grow up in their shoes and they didn't grow up in yours, so you have no idea of understanding how they're consuming this quarantine. And so reaching out to people and giving them a forum to be about them really makes you a closer organization and a better one ultimately. A third one I think is around outcomes versus time. Many organizations do a lot of time tracking and what are you doing and status updates, and you know a lot about what people are doing in terms of their time. But if I've learned anything from being an agilist, it's that time is intrinsically risk, not value. Delivery is value, and I think that Leo will speak a little bit more about some of the work that he does in delivering software and why it's so important to deliver it, not just talk about it. Making your teams accountable to outcomes. This is a great time to make a better company by really focusing more on the outcomes. What is the goal and how do you know you're achieving that goal? Because you're not going to be able to micromanage or understand or dictate how or be prescriptive in the way that you do things, it is really important to get people to be accountable to their outcomes. And if you haven't practiced that skill, it's not an easy one to learn, but I think it's a very important one, not just during a quarantine, but if you plan on emerging as a better organization, I think that teaching people how to be accountable to their outcomes is ultimately going to be a very important skill. So I'd say those three things, business agility, maintaining connectivity informally with your organization and people, and ultimately get yourself practice in being accountable to outcomes versus just time on a project.
Great. Yeah, I think I've experienced just personally that given this new environment where you're working remotely, but you maybe are working on because you want to take the dog out for a walk at lunch, or you have somebody that you're sharing a space with that's also involved in meetings and things like that. I've experienced a lot of empathy, and I think that candid communication and shared outcomes and expectations is super important at the moment. Leo joins us. Leo has a lot of experience in business continuity planning. He actually worked on a project with a tier 1 bank. And Leo, maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, what you've learned, and maybe how people can apply it right now.
Sure, Steve. Thank you for this question. And I'm also working from home, so I apologize for the background noise if you hear anything. So yeah, I was involved in the business continuity project for one of the largest banks in the U.S. And what I learned was that depending on the company and depending on the industry, business continuity can really be a very complicated process, which is a multi-step process that involves a lot of different people and a lot of different stages. And especially for a very large organization that has several thousand people, each department really needs to kind of do their own part to create those business continuity plans. But also, if we talk about banking, it's a highly regulated industry too. So there is also like a governing department on top of that makes sure that all those business continuity plans are actually addressing all the appropriate risks. So that's actually who we were working with, and we were helping this team to make sure that everybody's thinking about all the possible scenarios and planning to address them accordingly. It was, I would say that it was challenging because there is a number of off-the-shelf products in the space of like risk management and business continuity, but I would say that none of them are kind of tailored to like a specific organization and their specific business needs. And that's actually where we step in and help organizations and our customers, because we can integrate with off-the-shelf products in order to deliver like more value to their business process, because we can customize their experiences to make sure that they work in the most efficient way for their business. That's exactly what we did on this project too. We built a custom tailored piece of software for them that's right now kind of helping them to streamline their business continuity process, business continuity and business continuity review process, in order to make sure that all the business units of this bank are thinking about all the different risks across the risk spectrum.
Sure. And so how do you see business continuity changing at the moment?
Well, I'm not sure how it's changing right now in those uncertain times, but I'm certainly hoping that more companies will start thinking about that, starting to make sure that they do have a plan in place. They hopefully they would realize that it's better to invest in advance and do some planning than react to something that's already happened and you don't have a plan and they don't know what to do. So yeah, I certainly hope that this will help more businesses kind of realize that that's an important investment.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's definitely top of mind right now and will be whenever we come out of this. CJ, you worked on that project as well. Anything to add to Leo's experience?
I think that Leo said it very accurately. So I think that the key to what we did with this organization to think about is, number one, tools don't have to cost $1 million, right? This is one of the largest tier one banks in America, and they're at the forefront of business continuity. And we were able to bring them into the fold on how to build a solution that works specifically for them. That sort of MVP thinking, right? What is the most valuable product in the smallest form that you can create? And because this particular financial institution was so open-minded about that, they really did not spend a lot of money, to the point where they said, this is great, let's try this out. And I think that's the second thing that, he has sort of alluded to, but it's important to say, is when you build custom software, and I know there's a little bit of shameless plug here, but it's not just software you're getting. It's simultaneous learning and discovery of your problem and solutioning at the same time. And so when you see a major tier one bank doing this, it's awesome, because even banks like that, who have the ability to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars off the shelf, see the value in custom building software, because it adapts to their needs, and it provides a diverse set of eyes that allow you to co-invent that solution with you. So when you're going about this, if software is in the cards, consider what custom software can do in that simultaneous learning and solutioning method, versus something direct off the shelf that may work or may be over-engineered for what you need.
Sure. I think it also depends too on the level of complexity of the organization and the challenges that they face. Certainly with a tier one bank, custom was needed for their business needs. They had a lot of very specific things that they needed to factor into that an off-the-shelf solution wouldn't necessarily provide.
I agree.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to point out is it seems like in the process of building this application, just by going through that, the organization was put in a position where they were asking the right questions. So that process put them through the process of, oh, we didn't actually know that, and we went through this in building it, and that helped their business continuity planning as a result.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Leo kind of jump in here, but Leo and I have worked together for a long time, and one of the things I tell him is, you should be able to do the job of the stakeholder by the time you're done with the custom project. And so a big part of our experience with building custom software with our clients is learning their pain and to do the things that they do, because ultimately that gives us empathy for the job, and more importantly, it helps us understand the valuable things that we're doing for them. And once we get to that point, which we have with this particular project, they start to look at us and say, well, what do you think? You've been building this and doing this with us, and understand the problem as well as we do. And just diversifying their thought process and bringing more minds aligned to their problem brings intelligence and better solutions. So Leo, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly what we did. We spent most of the time figuring out what the problem is, what's the biggest pain point at the moment. And it was also a little bit challenging because we were not completely free because of some regulations, as I said, like auditing requirements and some other requirements that were also in place. So we had to, be creative and come up with solutions that would solve the problem and at the same time, adhere to all the regulatory requirements and also integrate with the existing off-the-shelf product. So, yeah, I would say that most of the time in projects like that, we spend more time like figuring out exactly what the problem is rather than actually, solutioning. Because once you know exactly what's wrong right now with the current process or what the people are struggling with, then you kind of have all the information you need to, build a great solution for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you'd mentioned that this doesn't have to cost an astronomical amount of money budget-wise. When can someone expect actually a solution like this to drive value? So are we talking months, years? I think right now some people are wondering, well, what do I do now? And so, what's an expected timeline for something like this?
It's a great question. I love that you staged that question. Actually, I didn't know you were going to ask it, so thank you.
Surprise.
Look, there's two parts to all of our managed solutions, and the first part is discovery. So, and traditionally speaking, and this was the absolute case with this major tier 1 bank, 2 weeks. 2 weeks we come in and we do a discovery, and that will give you confidence. That will let you know, will we understand the problem? Will we be part of the solution? What would that look like in terms of a roadmap, at least at some high level, as to when something like that might emerge? What are the goal statements of that roadmap? How do we find key milestones and know that we're hitting them? Oftentimes we tie direct guaranteed prices to that roadmap if there's a lot of knownness to the solution. So the first part is it doesn't have to take long to understand the value and how long that value will emerge over time. I could tell you with this particular project we're speaking of, it was, Leo, you might have to answer this, but I'm pretty sure it was within 6 months we had a release out that was being used and practiced. And I could tell you that was so well accepted that when we delivered it on a smaller scale to a smaller US-based group, it ultimately got adopted within 3 months of that on a more global scale. And this really is the best way for really any software solution, is to try it, to get some feedback on it, see how it's working, and then adapt it and grow it to your needs. And so most of these MVPs are going to be in that 4 month to probably 7 month time frame, largely because if we can't find something that is valuable to build within 3 to 7 months, we probably haven't thought enough about it or understand the problem well enough. So most of those solutions are going to be in that range.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks to both of you for joining me, CJ, Leo. I think it's been a good discussion around business resiliency and business continuity planning. We may do more of these, so if you have any questions for CJ or Leo regarding this topic or others, you can reach out to us. Our website, fortegroup.com. That's FORTEGRP.com. Find us on LinkedIn. We're going to be posting some content around this and suggestions. But it's also a conversation. We want to see, what challenges you're facing at this point, and we'll be hosting more discussions like this over the next few weeks. So yeah, Leo, CJ, thanks so much. Thank
you, Steve.
For watching, and take it easy, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.